Hello there, Sully here, the retired tanker yanker. Welcome to Transitions. I'm going to do something completely different today. As you know, I have not only never talked about things like politics or religion, I have bent over backwards to avoid the topic. Now, some people say, well, if you can't talk about it, what's wrong with you? I said, that's nothing that's wrong with me, it's what's wrong with other people. You know what they say, that opinions are like assholes, everyone's got one. And I'll take that a step further and say that they all stink. Because, quite frankly, people have opinions. And I'm going to give an example. Somebody put a Facebook post up there about how in Alabama, child molesters are given chemical injections which effectively chemically castrate them. And, while on the surface that sounds like, oh yeah, that's a good idea. First of all, how do you chemically castrate somebody? I mean, castration is the physical removal of at least the male, not the entire genitalia, but the gonads. It just means that basically you can't reproduce because the organ which produces the sperm is gone. But it doesn't take away the ability to molest, and there's other ways to molest. As far as I'm concerned, if you're convicted of being a child molester, you just should be locked away for life. It is the one time when life without parole is absolutely justified. And the thing is, in prison, child molesters don't last very long anyway. But I'm just going to say to you that, excuse me, coffee went down the wrong pipe. Sorry about that. There's something going on in this area right now. It's actually in Bucks County. It's a trial of a fellow named Kratz. And he's on trial for the murder of 4 young men that he and his cousin lured to a farm, and they murdered them and tried to destroy and dispose of their bodies. This fellow Kratz did confess to his involvement in it, confessed to at least 3 of the murders. And then he recanted that confession, and he's on trial. Last week he was found guilty on all counts of the 20 counts against him, which include homicide, conspiracy, and abuse of a corpse. Right now the jury is deliberating whether or not he should receive the death penalty. I have mixed feelings about the death penalty. Currently in Pennsylvania, any executions are being suspended. So even if somebody is sentenced to death, chances are you're not going to be executed in Pennsylvania until maybe till we get a turnover in the governor's office. And I'm not saying that's going to be a bad thing or a good thing. I'm rather indifferent about our current governor here in Pennsylvania. He's done some good things. He's done some stupid things. Our state attorney general, however, is pretty much on the ball. I really don't know his opinion on the death penalty or anything like that, but I guess there are times when the death penalty is justified, and I'm going to call for my own experience as a juror on a capital murder case, which was not quite 3 years ago. I was sitting on a jury that was hearing the case of a 20-year-old man who had murdered a fella and then got help to dispose of the weapon. And the fact of the matter is, the fella, all he had was a public defender. The public defender did absolutely nothing to convince us otherwise, and the prosecutor did everything in her power, everything she could do to convince us that the defendant was guilty. And I'm just telling you, it was so cut and dry that we were a little upset as the jurors that we weren't going to deliberate. I was the foreman of the jury, and I said, let's get the easy part down. There was 3 counts. Count was murder. We had to decide whether it was murder in the first degree or murder in the third degree. Unlawful possession of a firearm and possession of an instrument of a crime. And I just said, as a foreman, I said, let's knock those 2 out. Who says possession of an instrument of a crime, guilty? Everybody raised their hand. And not guilty, nobody raised their hand. I said, possession of a firearm without a license. Everybody again raised their hand. Okay, those were easy. The discussion was it first or third degree murder? And the fact of the matter is, this was a murder that was all over. The fellow who was killed, apparently he went and said something to a girl at a little corner bodega. And she took offense to it, whatever. She was only maybe 14 or 15 years old. She went home and told somebody about it, and told her cousin about it. And the cousin went over and started saying stuff, and the fellow's sister came out, and the 2 of them were the girl's cousin and the victim's sister were going to have a fight over this. Totally ridiculous. But I guess I don't know anything about that. So anyway, a friend of the girl in the fight showed up with a gun, .38 caliber revolver. And when apparently he had also, the defendant had also had a relationship with the girl in the fight, which is why he was there. The girl was the mother of his child. So apparently they had these 2 girls had their fair one. And when the guy came out, the guy that this fight was all over, the other fellow took out his gun and fired 2 shots. The victim went back in the house and basically bled out. There was no doubt about that. And we had to decide, was this first degree murder or third degree murder? First degree murder means premeditated. Third degree murder means it happened in the course of events, but it wasn't the intent at the beginning. And my argument was, if you show up somewhere with a gun, you have every intent to use it. I'm not going to debate gun control. I do support the Second Amendment, but I do believe that there are responsibilities that come with that right, and you need to respect that. People need to respect that. I don't have a problem with reasonable and rational gun control, but I could do a whole video on why the government will never come to take your guns off of you. In a nutshell, read Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution, where it says no ex post facto law or bill of attainder shall be passed. That's why they're not coming to take your guns off you, okay? And anything people says that this candidate saying he's coming to take your guns, well, if they try it, it's a violation of the Constitution. You can't do it. You can't pass a law saying, okay, you've been doing this, it's legal. Tomorrow it's illegal, so you got to give your guns back. No, it doesn't work like that. That's what they call a grandfather clause. Now, as far as seizure as evidence of a crime, police have every right to do that. If they come on you and they think you've committed a crime and you used a gun, they have the right to seize it. If you are acquitted, they have to give it back to you. And I will use a case in point where a woman I used to be involved with had a firearm stolen. And the person who stole it traded it for drugs. And the drug dealer he traded it to was arrested. The gun was seized, not confiscated, seized. The serial number was traced back to my girlfriend. She had done nothing wrong, so the police were obliged to return that firearm. And I told her, I said, look, I said, sell me that gun. And I bought it, and I held on to it for a few years until I sold it. It was a Walther PPKS, by the way. Anyway, the government's not going to take your guns off you unless you are convicted of a disqualifying offense. If you're disqualified, if you're convicted of a disqualifying offense, or for some other reason are found to be disqualified, you have the right and the opportunity to voluntarily dispose of your guns. You don't have to turn your gun in. You can give it to somebody. You can sell it. The government's not going to come and take it from you. They will give you every opportunity to dispose of it, and no set time. But anyway, getting back to Sean Kratz, like I said, the jury is now debating on whether or not to give him the death penalty. Going back to that trial that I had, we found, by the way, we found the defendant guilty of first-degree murder. And basically, there was only one juror that had some question in mind until I said, well, you show up some place with a gun, you have every intent to use it. And she said, yeah, you're right, of course. So we were kind of bummed out, and because just about the time we found the defendant guilty of murder, that's when the pizza showed up. I said, okay, we're still deliberating here, right, people? We're deliberating on whether we want pepperoni, sausage, or cheese. So we got to eat our pizza, and then we walked right out and I read the verdict to the court. But the thing is, when we came back in, there were 5 or 6 big cops in there. They were expecting an outbreak, so apparently the judge had warned these people. The court crier told us later, said, yeah, they were expecting trouble when the verdict was read. If the guy was found not guilty, the victim's friends and family were going to act out, and if the defendant was found guilty, his friends and family were going to act out. So the police were there. And when they escorted us out of the building and took us back to the juror room to give us our checks, they held us back for a while. And then they said, when you go out of here, split up. Don't walk out together. So apparently they were expecting some trouble. Fortunately, trouble never happened. But, you know, thinking about it, had this been a death penalty case, we would have had to deliberate on that. I have mixed feelings about the death penalty. But in this case, I probably would have, 20 years old, I probably would have, I don't know. I keep thinking about this every day. What if we had to consider the death penalty on this case? One day I wake up and say, well, he's 20 years old. You know, he's going to spend the rest of his life in jail. You know, he could be there for 50, 60 years. And if he is given the death penalty, he'll be appealing it for the next 50 or 60 years. So basically, if you have the death penalty, use it. I mean, yes, I understand that people have been executed wrongfully, and there's no way you can give that life that you take away from a person back if you find out that they're innocent, but it is what it is. And of course, we'll always have the court of public opinion that says, why are we mollycoddling these people? It won't cost us anything to kill. Yeah, well, it will cost you something to kill somebody. I think they said that the cost of an execution could incarcerate a person for 30 years. The amount of money it takes to execute somebody would pay to incarcerate somebody for 30 years. Now, I don't know if that's just Amnesty International spinning the statistics or not, but let's just say I'm not crazy about the death penalty, but I am a very, very cautious supporter of it. I think that there is a time and a place for executing criminals. And it's not out of expediency, or it's not out of eye for an eye, it's not out of revenge. Sometimes it's just, if the person is a total sociopath, and that's what I think Sean Kratz is, a sociopath. I think his cousin Cosmo DiNardo is also a sociopath. He escaped the death penalty by pleading guilty. But I don't think Sean Kratz is going to be executed. I think even if they give him the death penalty, he'll sit on death row for the rest of his life. Okay. Our most famous former death row inmate, Wesley Cook. I always said that maybe the death penalty, I know he killed a cop. He murdered Dan Faulkner. And I won't use that name that his nom de plume that he uses. His name is Wesley Cook, people. Get over it. Not that other name that he uses. Wesley Cook, my sincerest hope was that he rots to death. And I get this thing, don't let him die. Why? He shot Dan Faulkner in the head 5 times. Where were you when Dan Faulkner doing his job? Oh, and he just pulled him over for nothing. No. Dan Faulkner pulled over Wesley Cook's brother and one other person for driving the wrong way on a one-way street. And Wesley Cook shows up from out of nowhere with a gun and shoots the cop. Shoots Dan Faulkner. And Wesley Cook also, after being read his rights, I don't care what anybody says, oh, he's guilty, the man admitted to it. He said, with at least a dozen witnesses, he said to a police officer, after being informed that anything he said could be used against him, he said, and I quote, "That's right, I shot the MFer, I hope the MFer dies." That's an admission of guilt. You know, you can retract it all you want. You can't. You can retract it. What you can't do is unsay it. And his defense was, in court, was to just have outbursts of rage and anger and be disruptive to the point where he was taken from the court and he could only witness the proceedings on closed-circuit TV. So maybe Wesley Cook should have been executed, but apparently his death sentence was held up because the judge in the case gave the jury improper instructions, did not advise them to consider extenuating or mitigating circumstances. And now anytime there's a person on trial, whether it's for their life or their liberty, if it's a capital crime, the judge instructs you. You have to consider mitigating circumstances, you have to consider extenuating circumstances. And mitigating and extenuating circumstances sometimes are not going to be enough to sway the argument. So Sean Kratz may get the death penalty, may not get the death penalty, but I doubt he'll be executed. Maybe he'll rot to death in the prison ward, handcuffed to a bed alongside Wesley Cook, who is rotting to death right now, and good for him, I say. I hope he has a long, slow, painful death. And I hope he has time to think about what he did. As for Sean Kratz, I really don't know what to say. He's obviously guilty. He's admitted to his guilt, and then he may be recanted. But you know, you can retract your confession, but what you can't do is unsay it. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make. So this is about as political as I'm going to get on my opinions. Like I say, I'm a cautious supporter of the death penalty. I think if you're going to use it, use it. But, you know, don't pussyfoot around it, but it should be applied with the utmost jurisprudence. Okay. So, that's my 2 cents worth. And responsible comment invited. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and share. This is Sully, the retired tanker yaker. Safe and happy travels.